On the busiest street in Santa Aurora, a 4-year-old girl drags a luxury suitcase stuffed with $200,000 in cash. She found it beside a trash bin behind a grand hotel. That money could have saved her dying grandmother. But instead, the little girl chose to carry her family's only hope to the police station. She has no idea that when the wealthy owner of the suitcase arrives, his next action will change her life forever and prove that sometimes, the poorest person in the room carries the greatest treasure of all. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The morning mist hung thick over Barrio del Sol, clinging to the torn tarps and rusted tin walls like a cold, wet blanket. Inside one of the makeshift shelters, the dirt floor was damp, and the wind whistled through gaps in the metal siding with a sound that could make anyone shiver. Lena woke to the sound she'd come to dread most, her grandmother's coughing. The 4-year-old girl pushed herself up from the thin mat they shared, her small body moving with the careful efficiency of someone far older. Grandma Rosa's cough was worse this morning, deep and rattling, shaking her frail frame with each spasm. "Grandma," Lena whispered, crawling closer. Rosa tried to wave her away, but her hand trembled. Her face was pale, almost gray in the dim light filtering through the tarp. She pressed her other hand against her chest, her breathing shallow and labored. Lena knew what to do. She'd done it many times before. Moving to the corner of their shelter, she knelt by the small camping stove their neighbor had given them. Her tiny fingers worked the matches with practiced care, 1, 2, 3 strikes before it caught. She filled their dented pot with water from a plastic jug and set it on the flame. While the water heated, she reached for the small cloth bag hanging from a nail. Inside were dried herbs, chamomile, mint, and something else the lady 2 shelters down had said would help with breathing. Lena didn't know the name, but she knew how to use it. "Lena baby, you don't have to." Rosa's words dissolved into another coughing fit. "Grandma needs tea," Lena said simply, her voice carrying a certainty that seemed impossible for someone so small. She poured the hot water over the herbs in their only cup, chipped ceramic with a faded flower pattern. The steam rose, carrying a bitter-sweet smell. Lena waited, counting to 100 the way Grandma had taught her, then carefully carried the cup to her grandmother. Rosa took it with shaking hands, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. Not from pain this time, but from watching her granddaughter, a child who should be playing, should be carefree, moving through their poverty with such heartbreaking competence. "You're such a good girl," Rosa whispered after taking a sip. "Come here." Lena settled beside her and Rosa wrapped one thin arm around the child's shoulders. They sat like that for a while, grandmother and granddaughter against the world, listening to the sounds of the slum waking up around them. Babies crying, people arguing, the distant rumble of traffic from the city center. "Lena," Rosa said finally, her voice still rough but steadier now. "I need to tell you something important. Are you listening?" "Yes, Grandma. No matter how hard things get, no matter how much we need something, we never take what doesn't belong to us. Do you understand? We can be poor, baby, but we have to live with honor. That's the only thing no one can take from us." Lena nodded seriously, though she didn't fully understand all the words, but she understood the feeling behind them, the weight in her grandmother's voice. "Even if we're hungry," Lena asked, "even then, we ask for help, we work for what we need, but we don't take what's not ours. Promise me, Lena." "I promise, Grandma." Rosa pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. But the moment of peace was brief. Another pain lanced through Rosa's chest, sharp enough to make her gasp. She tried to hide it, but Lena saw, she always saw. "Grandma, your heart is hurting again." Rosa couldn't deny it. For months now the pains had been getting worse. The free clinic had finally told her the truth 3 weeks ago. Her heart was failing. She needed surgery, they said, a procedure that would cost more money than Rosa would see in 5 lifetimes. Without it, the doctor had warned with sad, tired eyes, she had maybe 6 months, maybe less. "It's okay, baby," Rosa lied. "It's just a little ache." But Lena had heard the doctors talking last time. She knew the word they used, dangerous. She knew what it meant when grown-ups spoke in quiet voices and shook their heads. She looked at her grandmother, the only family she had left, the only person in the world who loved her, and made a decision. Today, after Grandma fell back asleep, she would go to the city center. She would collect bottles and cans, as many as she could carry. The recycling place paid 25 cents for every pound. If she worked hard, if she found enough, maybe she could buy some medicine. Maybe she could help. Rosa drifted off, exhausted from the coughing fit, her breathing shallow but steady. Lena stayed beside her for another hour, watching, waiting, making sure she was okay. Then, moving as quietly as a mouse, the little girl slipped out into the gray morning. The slum was fully awake now, and Lena picked her way through the narrow paths between shelters, heading toward the main road. She carried an old plastic bag, already planning her route. The restaurants downtown threw out bottles. The park near the government buildings had trash cans that were always full. She would find enough. She had to. The walk from Barrio del Sol to downtown Santa Aurora took Lena nearly 2 hours. Her small legs carried her past the invisible line, where poverty ended and prosperity began. It was like crossing into a different world. The streets became cleaner, wider, the buildings grew taller, shinier. Cars that cost more than her entire neighborhood drove past without slowing down. Lena had been downtown before, but it never stopped feeling strange. She watched women in beautiful dresses walk into cafes, saw children her age holding their parents' hands, wearing clean clothes and new shoes. They looked at her when they looked at all with curiosity or discomfort before glancing away. She made her way through the busy streets, checking trash cans, finding a bottle here, a can there. By noon, her bag was only half full. She needed to find better spots. That's when she remembered the big hotels. Her friend's older brother had told her once that rich people threw away more in a day than poor people owned in a month. Maybe behind one of those hotels, she'd find enough bottles to make a difference. Lena walked until she saw it. The Regency Aurora, a 5-star hotel that stretched toward the sky like a palace of glass and steel. It was the fanciest building she'd ever seen. Even from across the street, it made her feel small and out of place. She stood there for a long moment, gathering her courage. The doorman out front wore a uniform nicer than any clothes she'd ever owned. People walked in and out like they belonged to a different species, carrying shopping bags, checking their phones, laughing about things Lena couldn't imagine. She couldn't go through the front. She'd be stopped immediately, maybe even chased away. So instead, she walked around the block, looking for the service entrance, the place where deliveries came and garbage went out. It took her 15 minutes to find the narrow alley behind the hotel. Here, away from the polished front, the world looked more familiar. Dumpsters, stacked crates, the smell of old food and cleaning chemicals. 2 workers in white uniforms were smoking by a door, speaking in quick Spanish she couldn't quite follow. They glanced at her but didn't say anything. She was just another street kid looking for scraps. Lena moved along the alley, checking behind the dumpsters, when something caught her eye. There, pushed almost out of sight behind a large garbage container, was a brown leather suitcase. It looked expensive, even to her untrained eyes. Smooth leather, brass corners, the kind of thing that belonged to someone important. The lock was partially open, the zipper undone just enough to see what was inside. Lena's heart began to pound. She looked around. The workers weren't paying attention. The alley was otherwise empty. She knelt down and pulled the suitcase toward her. It was heavy, heavier than it should be. With trembling fingers, she opened it wider. Money, stacks and stacks of money, bound with paper bands, arranged in neat rows. More money than Lena had ever imagined could exist in one place. The bills were mostly hundreds. She recognized them from when Grandma occasionally got one from a generous neighbor and talked about it for days. Lena's breath came in short gasps. Her hands shook as she touched one stack, pulling it out to look at it more closely. The band said $10,000. There were dozens of stacks just like it in the suitcase. This was enough money to save Grandma. Enough money for the surgery, for medicine, for food. Enough money to get them out of the slum, to give them a real home, a real life. All she had to do was close the suitcase and walk away with it. No one had seen her. No one would know. Lena's heart pulled in 2 directions at once. In her mind, she saw her grandmother's gray face, heard her labored breathing, remembered the doctor saying dangerous in that quiet final way. She saw their torn tarp shelter, the damp dirt floor, the endless struggle just to survive another day. But then she heard Grandma's voice, as clear as if her grandmother was standing right beside her. "We never take what doesn't belong to us. We can be poor, baby, but we have to live with honor." Tears began streaming down Lena's face. It wasn't fair. Why did being good have to hurt so much? Why couldn't she just this once take what she needed, when she needed it so badly? But even as she thought it, she knew she couldn't. Not because she was afraid of getting caught, because if she did this, she wouldn't be the granddaughter Grandma Rosa had raised. She would be breaking the promise she'd made just that morning. With tears blurring her vision, Lena closed the suitcase and zipped it completely shut. She looked at it for a long moment, as if saying goodbye to every dream it represented. Then she grabbed the handle and began pulling it toward the street. It was so heavy that she had to drag it, stopping every few feet to rest. The workers had gone inside. People passed on the main street, but no one stopped to help. Some stared at the strange sight of a tiny girl struggling with an expensive suitcase, but they kept walking, probably assuming she was with someone nearby. It took Lena another hour to reach the police station. By the time she dragged the suitcase up the steps and through the doors, her arms ached and her dress was soaked with sweat. The police station was a stark fluorescent-lit building that smelled like coffee and old papers. 3 officers sat at desks in the main room, 2 men and 1 woman, all of them looking up in surprise when a 4-year-old girl dragged a leather suitcase across their floor. "Hey sweetie, are you lost?" the female officer asked, coming around her desk. She had kind eyes and spoke gently. Her name tag read Officer Martinez. Lena shook her head. "I found this," she said, her voice small but clear, "behind the Regency Aurora Hotel. I think someone lost it." The officers exchanged glances. One of the men, older with gray hair, walked over and crouched down to Lena's level. "You found this, by yourself?" "Yes sir, it was behind the garbage cans. The lock was open, so I looked inside to see if there was a name or something. There's money in it, a lot of money, so I brought it here." The gray-haired officer, Sergeant Torres, according to his badge, carefully laid the suitcase flat and opened it. His eyes widened. The other 2 officers crowded around, and Officer Martinez let out a low whistle. "Mother of God," Torres breathed. "There must be, what, 200,000 here, maybe more." 247,000, the 3rd officer said, a younger man who was counting the bands. "Give or take." They all looked back at Lena, who stood there with her small bag of bottles still clutched in one hand, looking tired and scared, and impossibly small. "Sweetheart," Officer Martinez said slowly, "you found this money, and you didn't take any of it?" "Not even a little bit." Lena shook her head firmly. "It's not mine." Sergeant Torres stood up, running a hand through his gray hair. In his 30 years as a police officer, he'd seen plenty of people return wallets, phones, even jewelry. But $250,000 in cash, returned by a child who looked like she hadn't eaten a decent meal in weeks, that was a first. "Okay honey, we need to ask you some questions, all right? Nothing bad, we just need to understand what happened. Can you tell us your name?" "Lena Rosa Morales." "And where do you live, Lena?" Lena hesitated. She'd heard stories about children being taken away from their families by the government, put in homes with strangers. Fear flickered across her face. "It's okay," Officer Martinez said gently. "You're not in any trouble, we just need to know where to take you home." "Barrio del Sol," Lena whispered. "I live there with my grandma, my grandmother." "Just your grandmother? Where are your parents, honey?" "They died when I was a baby, a car accident." The officers' faces softened further. Sergeant Torres pulled out a form and began writing, while Officer Martinez went to the break room and returned with a package of cookies and a cup of hot chocolate. "Here sweetie, you must be hungry after all that walking." Lena took the cookies gratefully, but after eating 2, she carefully wrapped the rest in a napkin. "For Grandma," she explained. "She didn't eat breakfast." Officer Martinez had to turn away for a moment, blinking hard. They took Lena's statement, where she found the suitcase, what time, whether anyone saw her. She answered everything honestly, her voice never wavering. While they talked, the younger officer was making calls, trying to trace the suitcase and its owner. They'd been at it for about 20 minutes when the station door opened, and a man walked in. He was young, maybe 30, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sergeant Torres made in 3 months. His watch caught the fluorescent light, definitely a Rolex. Dark hair, sharp features, and an expression of barely controlled panic. "I'm Adrian Valdez," he said, his voice tight with stress. "I was told my suitcase was turned in here." All 3 officers straightened slightly. Everyone in Santa Aurora knew the name Valdez. Adrian's father was one of the wealthiest real estate developers in the country, and Adrian himself had built his own tech empire by age 25. "Mr. Valdez," Sergeant Torres said, stepping forward. "Yes, your suitcase is here. Can you describe it for me?" "Brown leather, brass corners, combination lock. Inside is approximately $250,000 in cash. I know it looks suspicious," he added quickly, "but it's payment for a private land deal, all documented, all legal. I set it down for just a moment at the hotel, and when I turned around it was gone. I've been going out of my mind. It's all here, Mr. Valdez. Every dollar." Torres gestured to the suitcase, now sitting on a table, its contents verified and counted. Adrian's relief was visible, his shoulders sagging. "Thank God. Thank you, officers. I don't know how to." "Don't thank us, sir. Thank her." Adrian turned to where Torres was pointing and saw Lena for the first time. She sat on a bench against the wall, small and thin, wearing a faded dress that was too big for her, her feet in worn sandals. She was holding a cup of hot chocolate in both hands and watching him with large, serious brown eyes. "She found it," Adrian's voice held disbelief. "She found it behind your hotel, saw it was full of money, and dragged it all the way here to turn it in," Officer Martinez said. "She's 4 years old." Adrian walked slowly toward Lena, crouching down the way Sergeant Torres had earlier. Up close, he could see how thin she was, the shadows under her eyes, the way her clothes hung on her small frame. "You found my suitcase?" he asked gently. Lena nodded. "And you brought it here instead of keeping it?" Another nod. Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Why?" It was Officer Martinez who answered. "She said it wasn't hers." But Adrian kept his eyes on Lena, waiting for her to respond. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "My grandma says we never take what doesn't belong to us, even if we need it really badly. She says being poor is okay, but being dishonest makes you poor inside, where it really matters." The room had gone completely silent. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Some wall he'd built up over years of living in a world where everyone wanted something, where trust was a commodity, and honor was a negotiating tactic. "Your grandmother sounds very wise," he managed to say. His throat felt tight. "She's sick," Lena said matter-of-factly. "Her heart doesn't work right, she needs surgery, but we don't have money for it. I was looking for bottles to recycle when I found your suitcase. I thought maybe if I took it, I could save her." She said it so simply, so honestly, that it hit Adrian harder than any elaborate story could have. This child had held in her hands the solution to her worst problem, and she'd given it up anyway. "But you didn't take it?" "No, sir, because Grandma wouldn't want me to. She'd rather die than have me steal, even to save her. That's what honor means." Adrian felt his eyes burning. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Maybe when he was younger than Lena, before his parents taught him that emotions were weakness and vulnerability was dangerous. But this little girl, who had nothing, who was facing losing everything, had just given him a lesson in integrity that shamed everything he thought he knew. "Officers," he said, standing up but keeping his voice level, "there's a reward for returning lost property, correct?" "Yes, sir," Torres said. "Usually 10% of the value. Then Lena has earned $25,000. The officers looked at each other, then at Adrian, then at Lena, who didn't seem to understand what that number meant. "That's very generous, Mr. Valdez," Officer Martinez said. "It's not generous, it's what she earned. It's also not enough." Adrian pulled out his phone, already making a call. "I need the number for San Felipe Hospital, whoever's in charge of cardiac surgery." He looked back at Lena, who was watching him with confused hope in her eyes. "Where's your grandmother now, Lena?" "At home. She's resting. The walk here is too far for her. Can you take me there?" "I'd like to meet her." Lena hesitated, glancing at the officers. Officer Martinez smiled and nodded. "It's okay, honey. Mr. Valdez is a good man. He'll make sure you get home safely." Adrian finished his call, having made an appointment with the chief of cardiology for the following morning. Then he held out his hand to Lena. "Come on, let's go meet your grandma." Lena took his hand, her tiny fingers disappearing into his palm. As they walked out of the police station together, the billionaire and the child from the slums, Sergeant Torres shook his head in wonder. "In 30 years, he said to no one in particular, I've never seen anything like that. Me neither, Officer Martinez agreed, watching through the window as Adrian helped Lena into his car, a sleek black Mercedes that cost more than most people's houses. Me neither. The drive to Barrio del Sol took only 20 minutes in Adrian's car, but it felt like crossing into another dimension. The smooth highways gave way to broken roads, then to dirt paths. Buildings became shacks, and shacks became shelters made of whatever materials people could find. Adrian had lived his entire life in Santa Aurora, but he'd never been here, never seen this side of the city that existed in the shadows of his skyscrapers. "This is where you live?" he asked Lena, trying to keep the shock from his voice. "Yes sir, my home is that one, with the blue tarp." Adrian parked the car, which immediately attracted attention from everyone nearby, and followed Lena down a narrow path between shelters. The ground was muddy from the morning's moisture, and the smell of poverty was overwhelming. Unwashed bodies, rotting garbage, smoke from cooking fires, human waste. Children watched them pass with wary eyes. A woman hanging laundry stared openly at Adrian's expensive suit. Lena stopped at a shelter that looked even more precarious than the others. The blue tarp Lena had mentioned formed most of the roof, tied down with ropes to a frame of scavenged wood and corrugated metal. One strong wind could probably collapse the whole thing. "Grandma," Lena called softly, ducking through the tarp that served as a door. "Grandma, I brought someone." Adrian had to bend nearly in half to follow her inside. The space was tiny, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with a dirt floor covered partially by a worn carpet that looked like it had been rescued from someone's trash. In one corner was the camping stove he'd heard about, in another corner a few cardboard boxes that seemed to contain their possessions. 2 thin mats lay against one wall, covered with blankets that were mostly holes held together by a few remaining threads. And there, slowly sitting up from one of the mats, was Grandma Rosa. She was old, Adrian guessed maybe 70. Though poverty probably made her look older than she was. Her hair was white and pulled back in a simple bun, her face lined with wrinkles that spoke of a hard life, but her eyes were clear and sharp, and despite her frailty, she held herself with a quiet dignity. "Lena, baby, where have you been? I was worried." Rosa's voice was hoarse but gentle. Then she saw Adrian, and confusion flickered across her face. "Who's this?" "Grandma, this is Mr. Valdez. I found his suitcase today, and he wanted to meet you." Adrian stood there awkwardly, feeling enormous in the tiny space, hyper-aware of how out of place he was. Rosa studied him for a long moment, taking in his expensive clothes, his Rolex, everything about him that screamed wealth. "Please," she said finally, gesturing to the ground, "sit. I'd offer you a chair, but we don't have any." "Lena, make some tea for our guest." "That's not necessary," Adrian started to say, but Rosa gave him a look that reminded him of his grandmother, the only family member who'd ever really paid attention to him, and he found himself sitting cross-legged on the dirt floor. Lena was already at the stove, preparing tea with the same practiced efficiency he'd seen described in the police report. Rosa watched her granddaughter with obvious love, then turned back to Adrian. "So, you're the man whose money my Lena found?" "Yes ma'am, she returned every dollar. She's an extraordinary child. She's a good girl," Rosa said simply. "I've tried to teach her right from wrong, even when right is hard, especially when right is hard." "The officers told me about your situation, about your heart." Rosa's face closed slightly. "That's not your concern, Mr. Valdez. Please, call me Adrian, and I'd like it to be my concern. Your granddaughter did me an incredible service. I want to help." "We don't need charity." "It's not charity. It's gratitude. It's trying to balance the scales a little bit." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Lena brought over 2 cups of tea, mismatched, chipped, but clean, and handed one to Adrian. The tea was bitter and herbal, nothing like the expensive blends he usually drank, but he sipped it gratefully. "Tell me, Adrian Valdez," Rosa said after a while, "why would a man like you come all the way here? You could have sent your assistant, or a check. Why come yourself?" It was a good question, and Adrian didn't have a prepared answer. He sat there, holding the cheap cup, surrounded by poverty so extreme it made his throat tight, and tried to find the words. "Because I needed to see," he said finally. "I needed to understand how someone could do what Lena did, where that kind of honesty comes from." "It comes from love," Rosa said quietly, and from knowing what really matters, we don't have much, but we have each other. That's worth more than all the money in your suitcase. I believe you, Adrian said, and he meant it. Can I ask you something personal? Rosa nodded, sipping her tea. The officers said Lena lives with just you. Her parents died when she was 6 months old, a drunk driver. My daughter and son-in-law, gone in an instant. Lena survived because she was in a car seat in the back. I took her in, of course. She's all I have left of my Maria, and you've raised her alone. Here, I did better before. I had a job cleaning houses, made enough to rent a small apartment, but then my heart started failing, and I couldn't work anymore. We lost the apartment 3 months ago. This is what we could afford. Adrian looked around the shelter again, seeing it with new eyes. Every detail spoke of Rosa's attempts to maintain dignity in impossible circumstances. The clean cups, the neatly folded blankets, the way Lena's few pieces of clothing were hung carefully on a rope stretched across one corner. I want to help, he said again. Please, let me help. Why? Rosa's eyes were sharp. Because you feel guilty, because we're a good story to tell at your next business dinner. The words stung because there was truth in them. How many times had Adrian seen wealthy people use charity as a social badge, a tax write-off, a way to feel better about themselves without actually connecting with the people they were helping? No, he said slowly. I don't think so. I think I need this as much as you do. Rosa raised an eyebrow, waiting, and then for reasons Adrian couldn't fully explain even to himself, he started talking. Maybe it was Rosa's direct gaze, or the strange intimacy of sitting on a dirt floor drinking bitter tea, or the way this tiny shelter felt somehow more real than anywhere else he'd been in years. Whatever the reason, words started pouring out of him that he'd never spoken to anyone. I grew up rich, he began. My father is Carlos Valdez. You might have heard of him. He owns half the commercial real estate in Santa Aurora. My mother is Elena Valdez. She runs a fashion empire. I grew up in a house with 20 rooms, servants, everything you could imagine. He paused, took a breath, and I was completely alone. Rosa didn't say anything, just listened, and somehow that made it easier to continue. My parents were always working, always busy, always somewhere else. I had nannies, tutors, drivers, a whole staff of people paid to take care of me, but no one who actually cared. Not really. My father cared about his business deals. My mother cared about her reputation. I was just another project to manage. Lena had come to sit beside her grandmother, listening with solemn attention. When I was 6, Adrian continued, I won an award at school, first place in a science competition. I was so excited. I thought maybe this time, they'd come. They'd see what I did. But my father sent his assistant with a check for the school. My mother was at Fashion Week in Milan. They didn't even call. His voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat, embarrassed. I learned early that nothing I did mattered unless it related to money or status. My father wanted me to be perfect. Straight A's, perfect SAT scores, early admission to Harvard, not because he cared about my education, but because it looked good, made him look good. His son, the prodigy. And your mother? Rosa asked gently. She wanted me to be her accessory, handsome, well-dressed, charming at parties. She'd parade me around at her events when I was young, but only when it benefited her image. As soon as I got old enough to have my own opinions, to be a real person instead of a prop, she lost interest. Adrian realized his hands were shaking. He set down the teacup carefully. I don't remember ever having a family dinner, not one. My father ate in his study while working. My mother ate at restaurants with her friends. I ate with whatever nanny was on duty that week. They cycled through so fast I stopped learning their names. That's so sad, Lena said softly. Adrian looked at her, this tiny girl who had nothing but seemed to understand everything. I built my company partly to prove I could, partly to escape. Made my first million at 22, my first 10 million at 25. Do you know what my father said when I told him? Rosa shook her head. He said, good, now you can buy your own house and stop being a burden. I was 25 years old and that was the longest conversation we'd had in 3 years. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have a penthouse apartment that I barely live in. I have a car worth more than most houses. I have investments, assets, connections, everything someone is supposed to want. And I'm so lonely I can't remember the last time I looked forward to going home." The words hung in the air of the small shelter. Outside, life in the slum continued, children playing, people arguing, someone cooking something that smelled of spices and smoke. But inside, there was just quiet understanding. "I've never told anyone that," Adrian said finally. "Not friends, not therapists, not anyone. I don't even know why I'm telling you." Rosa reached out and placed her weathered hand over his. "Because you're looking for what we have," she said simply. "Love, real love, not bought or performed or conditional on success. You're looking for family." "I'm 30 years old," Adrian said, his voice barely a whisper, "and I don't know what that feels like." "Yes you do," Rosa said. "You felt it when Lena held your hand at the police station. You felt it when you decided to come here instead of sending someone else. You felt it the moment you walked through that tarp door. You're feeling it right now." Adrian closed his eyes, and to his shock, tears started flowing. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Maybe when he was 7 and his nanny quit, and no one told him until he came home from school to find a stranger in her place. He'd learned to lock that pain away, to pretend it didn't exist. But sitting on a dirt floor in a slum, holding hands with an old woman he'd just met, with a 4-year-old girl who'd just taught him everything his expensive education had missed, the walls finally cracked. "I'm sorry," he gasped, trying to wipe his face. "I don't know what's wrong with me." "Nothing is wrong with you," Rosa said firmly. "You're just finally feeling what you've been missing. That's not weakness, Adrian. That's courage." Lena climbed into Adrian's lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "It's okay to be sad," she whispered. "Grandma says sometimes crying is how we let the hurt out so there's room for happy." Adrian held the little girl, this child who'd given up a fortune to stay true to her grandmother's teachings, and sobbed. For his lost childhood, for his absent parents, for 30 years of loneliness disguised as success. And Rosa, who'd lost her daughter, who was dying from a broken heart, who lived in a shelter made of tarps and hope, let him cry. Because she understood that sometimes the richest person in the room is the poorest, and the greatest poverty is having no one to love. When Adrian finally composed himself, Rosa handed him a cloth to wipe his face. "Adrian Valdez," she said, her voice warm despite her exhaustion, "you came here to help us. But I think maybe we're going to help each other." Adrian nodded, unable to speak. "You said you wanted to balance the scales. Here's how we'll do it. You help with my surgery, with getting Lena and me into a safer place, and we'll help you learn what you've been missing, how to be part of a family." "I don't know how," Adrian admitted. "Neither did we once," Rosa said, squeezing his hand. "But we'll figure it out together." As the afternoon faded into evening, Adrian sat with them, listening to Lena tell stories about her day, watching Rosa teach her granddaughter how to sort dried beans for dinner, participating in the small rituals of a life completely different from his own. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Adrian Valdez felt like he'd come home. Adrian came back the next day. And the day after that. He'd arranged for Rosa to meet with the chief cardiac surgeon at San Felipe Hospital, the best in the region. But Rosa had insisted she felt well enough to wait a few more days. She wanted to get her affairs in order first, she said, to make sure Lena would be cared for if something happened during the surgery. On the 4th day, Adrian arrived in the late afternoon with groceries, not charity, he'd carefully framed it, but ingredients for dinner that he hoped Rosa would teach him to cook. He'd never learned. His childhood had been catered meals and restaurant food, and his adult life had been takeout and business dinners. But when he ducked through the tarp door, calling out a greeting, the scene that met him stopped his blood cold. Lena was crouched over her grandmother, her small hands on Rosa's shoulders, shaking her gently and crying. "Grandma, please, Grandma, wake up, Grandma." Rosa lay on her mat, eyes closed, her breathing shallow and ragged. Her skin had a grayish tint, and even from the doorway, Adrian could see that her lips were tinged with blue. He dropped the groceries and was at Rosa's side in 2 steps. "Lena, I need you to step back, okay? Let me check her." His hands shook as he felt for Rosa's pulse. It was there, but weak and irregular, fluttering like a trapped bird. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat. "What happened? When did she fall?" "I don't know." Lena was sobbing now, terrified. She was making lunch and she said her chest hurt really bad, and then she just fell down and she won't wake up. Adrian's medical knowledge was limited, but he'd seen enough to know this was critical. Heart failure probably. The kind of moment Rosa's doctors had warned about. Okay, it's okay Lena, we're going to help her. But we need to move fast. He scooped Rosa up, she weighed almost nothing, fragile as a bird, and carried her toward the door. She moaned softly, her eyelids fluttering but not opening. Lena, stay right behind me, don't let go of my jacket. He could feel the little girl's hand clutching the fabric of his suit as they rushed through the slum. People stared, some called out asking what was wrong, but Adrian didn't stop. His car was parked at the entrance to Barrio del Sol, a 5-minute walk that felt like an eternity. Rosa's breathing was getting shallower. Adrian could feel her heart struggling against his chest as he carried her, each beat weaker than the last. Hold on Rosa, he whispered urgently. Please hold on. Lena needs you, just hold on. He reached the car and fumbled with the keys, finally getting the back door open. He laid Rosa across the back seat as gently as he could, then turned to Lena. Get in next to her, hold her hand. Talk to her, okay, keep her with us. Lena scrambled in, taking her grandmother's cold hand in both of hers. Grandma, I'm here, it's Lena, please don't leave me, Grandma, please. Adrian jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the keys. He pulled out his phone, calling the hospital as he peeled out of the parking area. This is Adrian Valdez. I'm bringing in a critical heart failure patient, late 60s, history of cardiac disease, currently unconscious. ETA 10 minutes. Have a cardiac team ready. He didn't wait for a response, just threw the phone on the passenger seat and drove faster than he ever had in his life, one hand on the wheel, one hand punching buttons to call his assistant. Maria, I need you to call ahead to San Felipe, tell them to prep for emergency cardiac surgery. Tell Dr. Santos I'm calling in every favor he owes me, just have everything ready. In the back seat, Lena was talking to her grandmother in a continuous stream, her voice high and frightened. Remember the story you told me about when you were little, Grandma? About the mango tree. You have to wake up and finish telling me that story. You promised you'd teach me your rice pudding recipe. You promised, Grandma. You can't leave without teaching me. Please wake up, please. Adrian's vision was blurring with tears, but he forced himself to focus on the road, weaving through traffic, running red lights, not caring about anything except getting Rosa to the hospital in time. How is she, Lena? I don't know. Lena's voice cracked. She's so cold, Adrian. Why is she so cold? The hospital is close, baby. Just 2 more minutes. Keep talking to her. But Lena had run out of words. She just held her grandmother's hand and sobbed, her small body shaking with the force of her fear. Adrian pulled into the emergency bay at San Felipe Hospital with a screech of tires. The cardiac team was already waiting, just as he'd demanded. Doctors, nurses, a gurney, female, approximately 70, end-stage heart failure, unconscious for approximately 15 minutes. Adrian rattled off as they lifted Rosa onto the gurney. Pulse is weak and irregular, breathing shallow. She needs surgery now. Dr. Santos, the chief of cardiology, a man who'd been Adrian's family doctor and who owed the Valdez family for funding a new cardiac wing, was barking orders. Get her to OR 3, I want a full cardiac panel and imaging stat. Someone get me her medical history. She doesn't have much, Adrian said, keeping pace with the gurney, as they rushed through the corridors. She's been too poor to afford treatment. Basic diagnosis of congestive heart failure, but no detailed workup. Then we're doing it now. Sir, you need to stay in the waiting area. Like hell, Adrian. Dr. Santos stopped and gripped his shoulder, his voice firm but kind. Let me do my job. I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can. But you need to take care of the little one. Adrian looked down. He hadn't even realized Lena had followed them in, was standing beside him looking lost and terrified in the bright clinical hallway. Go to the surgical waiting room. Someone will bring you updates. I've got her now. And then they were through the double doors marked authorized personnel only, and Adrian was left standing in the corridor, with Lena, who looked up at him with eyes full of a fear no 4-year-old should have to feel. Is Grandma going to die? Adrian knelt down and pulled her into a tight hug. Dr. Santos is the best doctor in the whole city. If anyone can help your grandma, it's him. But you don't know if she'll be okay. Adrian wanted to lie, wanted to promise everything would be fine. But he thought about Rosa's teachings, about honesty even when it's hard. I don't know, he admitted quietly. I really don't know, but I know they're going to try their hardest, and I know your grandma is strong. She's fought for you for 4 years, she's not going to give up now. Lena buried her face in his shoulder and cried. Adrian picked her up and carried her to the surgical waiting room, a space he'd been in before when his grandfather had surgery, a space designed to be comforting, but that still felt cold and impersonal. He sat in one of the chairs, holding Lena in his lap, and waited. The minutes crawled by. Lena cried herself into exhaustion, and fell asleep in his arms, her breathing finally evening out. Adrian held her, afraid to move, afraid to do anything that might disturb her fragile peace. A nurse brought him coffee and a blanket for Lena. Dr. Santos sent word that the surgery has started, she said gently. It's going to be several hours. Can I get you anything? Something for the little one when she wakes up. Maybe some juice and crackers, Adrian said. Thank you. When the nurse left, Adrian looked down at the sleeping child in his arms. She was so small, so vulnerable, and she'd already lost so much. The thought of her losing Rosa too was unbearable. Please, he whispered to whatever God might be listening, please let her be okay. This little girl deserves to keep her grandmother, she deserves that much. Hours passed, night fell. Lena woke up briefly, drank some juice, asked about her grandma in a small voice, then fell back asleep. Adrian called his assistant to cancel all his meetings for the next 3 days. He called his mother, who sounded annoyed at being disturbed. He called his father, who didn't answer. Finally, near midnight, Dr. Santos emerged through the surgical doors. His face was exhausted but not grim, and Adrian's heart leaped. She made it through, Santos said, sitting down heavily in the chair next to Adrian. It was touch and go. Her heart was in worse shape than I expected. But we did a triple bypass, replaced one valve, and her heart is responding well to the repairs. She's going to live. If she makes it through the next 48 hours without complications, her prognosis is actually quite good. She'll need cardiac rehab, medication, lifestyle changes. But yes, Adrian, she should live. Adrian's hands were shaking again, but this time with relief so intense it felt like euphoria. Can I see her? She's in ICU, still unconscious from the anesthesia, but in an hour or so, yes, 5 minutes no more. She needs rest. Thank you, Diego. I mean it. Thank you. Santos patted his knee. That's what I do. But Adrian, that little girl is lucky to have you. Not many men would do what you're doing. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just trying to be decent. That's more special than you think. When Dr. Santos left, Adrian gently shook Lena awake. Lena, baby, wake up. I have good news. Her eyes opened, heavy with sleep, then suddenly alert. Grandma, the surgery worked. She's going to be okay. Lena burst into tears again, but these were different. Tears of relief, of joy. She clung to Adrian, and he held her, both of them crying in the middle of the empty waiting room. She's really okay. She's really okay. She's sleeping now, but in a little while, we can go see her for a few minutes. I was so scared. I know. Me too. When they were finally allowed into the ICU, Lena stood beside her grandmother's bed, holding the old woman's hand carefully to avoid disturbing all the tubes and wires. Rosa looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, but her color was better, and the monitor showed a steady, strong heartbeat. Grandma, Lena whispered, I'm here. You're going to be okay. The doctors fixed your heart. You're going to be okay. Rosa's fingers twitched slightly, as if responding to her granddaughter's voice even in sleep. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt something settle in his chest. He'd saved her. They'd saved her. This family that had adopted him into their small, fierce circle, they were going to be okay. Rosa stayed in intensive care for 5 days. Adrian visited every morning and evening, and Lena stayed by her grandmother's bedside almost constantly, only leaving when the nurses insisted she needed to eat or sleep. But there was a problem. Lena couldn't go back to their shelter alone. She was 4 years old. She needed supervision, care, a safe place to stay. On the third day, Adrian solved it the only way he knew how. "Lena," he said gently, kneeling beside her chair in the ICU waiting room, "I need to ask you something." She looked up from the coloring book a kind nurse had given her. "How would you feel about staying at my house while your grandma recovers, just temporarily, until she's strong enough to come home?" Lena's eyes widened. "Your house, just for a little while? It's big, and you'd have your own room, and we could visit your grandma every day. Would grandma want me to?" "I think your grandma would want you to be safe and taken care of, and I promise you, that's what I'll do." Lena thought about it seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but just until grandma can come home." That evening, Adrian brought Lena to his penthouse apartment in downtown Santa Aurora. When she stepped out of the elevator directly into his foyer, her mouth fell open. "This is where you live?" "Yes, come on, I'll show you around." The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of one of the most expensive buildings in the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Santa Aurora, the lights of the city stretching to the horizon. The furniture was modern and minimal, everything in shades of white, black and gray. It looked like something from an architecture magazine, beautiful and completely impersonal. Adrian watched Lena take it all in: the enormous living room, the kitchen with appliances that probably cost more than most cars, the bathroom that was bigger than their entire shelter had been. She touched things carefully, as if afraid they might break. "Are you hungry?" Adrian asked. "I can order anything you want. You don't cook." "I know, I don't really know how. Remember, that's what I was going to have your grandma teach me." Lena thought about this. "Can we have pizza?" Adrian smiled. "We can absolutely have pizza." While they waited for the food, he showed her the guest room he'd hastily prepared. A cleaning service had come through earlier in the day, and he'd ordered a bed, some basic furniture, even some stuffed animals he thought a 4-year-old might like. Lena stood in the doorway, staring. "This is all for me. If you want it, you can arrange things however you like." She walked in slowly, running her hand over the soft bedspread, looking at the stuffed rabbit sitting on the pillow. Then she turned back to Adrian with tears in her eyes. "I've never had my own room before. You do now, at least for now." That night, after pizza and a bath in the huge marble bathroom, Lena got into the bed, wearing one of Adrian's t-shirts as a makeshift nightgown. They'd go shopping for real clothes tomorrow. She looked incredibly small in the middle of the big bed. "Adrian," she called as he was turning to leave. "Yes, will you stay until I fall asleep? I don't like being alone in new places." He settled into the chair beside the bed. "Of course, can you tell me a story?" Adrian realized he didn't know any children's stories, so instead, he told her about the first program he'd ever written, about learning to code when he was 12, making it into an adventure about teaching computers to think. Halfway through, Lena interrupted. "Adrian, yeah, I'm really glad you found us. Even though it was because I found your suitcase, I'm glad." "Me too, Lena. Me too." She fell asleep a few minutes later. Adrian sat there for a long while, watching her sleep. This little girl who'd somehow become the center of his world in just a few days. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a routine. Adrian would work from home in the mornings, while Lena watched cartoons or colored. They'd visit Rosa in the afternoon. She was getting stronger, able to sit up and talk, though she tired easily. In the evenings, Adrian taught himself to cook simple meals with YouTube videos, and Lena helped or made suggestions based on what Grandma had taught her. She had nightmares sometimes, about losing her grandmother, about the shelter collapsing, about being alone. Adrian would hear her cry out and rush in, holding her until she calmed down, learning on the fly how to comfort a frightened child. He enrolled her in a pre-K program at a good school near his building. The first day, Lena clutched his hand so tightly it hurt, but the teacher was kind, and by pickup time, she was excited to tell him about painting and story time, and a new friend named Maya. 3 weeks after the surgery, Dr. Santos declared Rosa well enough to be discharged. But discharged to where? The shelter in Barrio del Sol was impossible. She needed proper rest, good nutrition, less stress. Adrian had already thought of that. I bought a house, he told Rosa during their evening visit. Small place in Silverwood, near good schools. 3 bedrooms, a yard. It's furnished and ready to move into. I'd like you and Lena to live there. Rosa was sitting in her hospital bed, looking stronger than she had in weeks. The surgery had given her a new lease on life. Color had returned to her face. She could breathe without pain. But her expression was troubled. Adrian, we can't accept that. It's too much. You can, and you will. Rosa, I'm not asking. That shelter is going to kill you. Lena needs a stable home, a safe place to grow up. This isn't charity. It's family taking care of family. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. You really see us that way, as family, don't you? She reached out and took his hand. Yes, yes I do. You've become like a son to me, Adrian. These past weeks, watching you care for Lena, seeing you try so hard to do right by us, I couldn't love you more if you were my own. Adrian had to look away, blinking hard. Then let me do this. Let me give you both a home. On one condition, Rosa said firmly. You visit often. You eat dinner with us. You don't just set us up somewhere and disappear. Because you're right, we're family now, and families stay together. I can do that. The house in Silverwood was perfect. A modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home, on a quiet street, with neighbors who waved hello and a small backyard with an oak tree. Compared to Adrian's penthouse, it was tiny. Compared to a shelter in Barrio del Sol, it was a palace. When Adrian brought them there for the first time, Rosa in a wheelchair, still recovering, and Lena bouncing with excitement, he felt more nervous than he had during any business presentation. Welcome home, he said, unlocking the front door. The look on Rosa's face was worth every dollar it had cost. She covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. It's beautiful, she whispered. Lena was already running through the house, discovering her room with its bright yellow walls, the kitchen with a real stove, the bathroom with a bathtub big enough to swim in. Adrian, come see, I have a closet, a real closet. He showed them around, the refrigerator stocked with food, the pantry full, the medical equipment he'd arranged for Rosa's recovery, everything they could need. There's something else, he said, leading them to the backyard. In the corner, near the oak tree, was a small garden bed already planted with herbs and vegetables. I remember you mentioning you used to have a garden, Adrian told Rosa, before things got hard. I thought maybe you'd like to have one again. Rosa couldn't speak, she just hugged him. This old woman, who'd been a stranger a month ago, and who now felt like the mother he'd never really had. That night, Adrian stayed for dinner, takeout from a local restaurant, eaten at their new dining table. Afterward, he helped put Lena to bed in her new room. This is really ours, she asked for the 10th time. We get to stay here, really truly. This is your home now, and you'll come visit, as often as you'll let me. She hugged him tight. Every day, okay, promise, I promise. As he was leaving, Rosa walked him to the door, slowly, still building her strength, but on her own feet. Adrian, she said, I want you to know something. You saved our lives, not just with the money for surgery, or this house. You gave us hope when we had none. You gave us family when we thought it was just the two of us against the world. I don't know how to thank you for that. You already did, Adrian said. You let me in. You gave me what I've been looking for my whole life. That's worth more than anything I could buy. He drove home that night, feeling something he couldn't name at first. It took him a while to recognize it, because he'd felt it so rarely in his life. Contentment. Pure, simple contentment. 6 months after Rosa's surgery, Adrian's company landed the deal of a lifetime. A major international corporation wanted to partner with him to expand his technology platform across Asia, starting with a massive project in Tokyo. The deal would triple his company's valuation overnight and establish him as a global player in the tech industry. There was just one catch.
They wanted him in Tokyo for 2 years to personally oversee the expansion. The offer came in the form of a phone call from James Chen, the CEO of the corporation, during a regular Tuesday afternoon. Adrian was at Lena's school, watching her class perform a play about vegetables. She was playing a carrot, and she was taking it very seriously. "Adrian, this is a once-in-a-career opportunity," James said. "We're talking about a $150 million contract, with potential for 3 times that if the expansion succeeds. But we need you there, on the ground, making decisions. It's non-negotiable." "When would I need to start?" "6 weeks. We're moving fast on this. I need an answer by Friday." Adrian's mind was racing. $150 million, global recognition, everything he'd worked for his entire career, handed to him on a silver platter. "I need to think about it," he said. "Don't think too long. We have other options if you're not interested." After the call ended, Adrian sat in the small auditorium chair, watching Lena deliver her lines about the importance of vegetables in a healthy diet, and felt torn in two. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse. He still maintained it, though he spent most of his time at the Silverwood house, and made a list. Reasons to go to Tokyo: massive financial opportunity, career advancement beyond imagination, establish global reputation, secure future beyond any doubt. Reasons to stay: Lena and Rosa. That was it. Just 2 words on the second list, but they weighed more than everything on the first. He spent the next few days in turmoil. He didn't mention the offer to Rosa or Lena, but Rosa noticed something was wrong. "You've been distracted," she said one evening, while they were cleaning up after dinner. Lena was in the living room, building an elaborate castle with blocks. "Work stuff," Adrian said vaguely. "Want to talk about it?" He did. God, he did. So he told her about the offer, the money, the opportunity, the choice he had to make. Rosa listened carefully, not interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's a big opportunity," she finally said. "I know, and you're torn." "Very." "Adrian, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "I want you to understand something. Lena and we're grateful for everything you've done. More grateful than we can ever express, but we're not chains holding you back. If this is what you want, if this is what's best for your career, for your future, then you should go. But let me finish. You've given us security. This house is paid for. There's money for Lena's education. My medical bills are covered. We'll be okay. We don't want you to sacrifice your dreams for us." "You're not a sacrifice," Adrian said fiercely. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "Then you need to figure out what matters most to you, and whatever you decide, we'll support you. 2 years isn't forever. You could visit, we could video call. It's not the same."
"No," Rosa agreed. "It's not." Adrian went home that night more confused than ever. He pulled out a financial calculator and ran the numbers. The Tokyo deal would set him up for life. Not that he wasn't already set up, but this was different. This was legacy money. This was Forbes cover money. But what legacy was he building? His father had all the money in the world, and he died lonely, leaving a son who barely spoke to him. His mother collected art and threw parties, but she'd never collected moments, never threw her arms around her son and told him she was proud. Was that who Adrian wanted to be? On Thursday night, 2 days before he had to give his answer, Lena overheard him on a phone call with his business manager discussing the logistics of a potential Tokyo move. After he hung up, she appeared in the doorway of his home office, her face pale. "You're going away." Adrian's heart sank. "Lena, you're leaving us." Her voice was small, hurt, the voice of every time someone had left her before. "No, I mean, I don't know. It's complicated. Are we not good enough?" Tears were starting to fall. "Did we do something wrong?" "Oh baby, no." He pulled her into a hug. "You did everything right. This isn't about you. Then why would you go?" It was a simple question from a 5-year-old, but it cut to the heart of everything. "It's for work. It's a big opportunity. More big than us." Adrian didn't have an answer for that. That night he couldn't sleep at all. He paced his penthouse, looking out over the city lights, thinking about everything he'd gained in the past 6 months. He thought about Lena's laugh, about Rosa's gentle wisdom, about family dinners and bedtime stories, and teaching a 5-year-old to ride a bike. about being there for school plays and doctor's appointments and lazy Sunday mornings, about being present for a life, not just successful at a career. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother of all people. They'd barely spoken in months. Heard about Tokyo offer. Take it, don't be stupid. Classic Elena Valdez, always pushing, always focused on achievement and status and the next big thing. He thought about calling her, asking her if she was happy, if after all her success and all her accolades she felt fulfilled, but he already knew the answer. He'd seen it in her eyes the few times they'd met for obligatory dinners, a emptiness that all the champagne and designer clothes couldn't fill. Adrian pulled out a legal pad and drew a line down the middle, but this time he didn't label them reasons to go and reasons to stay. He labeled them what I have and what I'd lose. The second column filled up fast. Every dinner with Lena and Rosa, every time Lena called him for help with homework, every garden conversation with Rosa, every school event, every milestone, every ordinary Tuesday evening that had somehow become extraordinary. The first column stayed mostly empty. He'd have money, sure, success, recognition, but he already had those things. What he wouldn't have was the people who taught him what actually mattered. At 3 in the morning, Adrian made his decision. Friday morning, Adrian called James Chen. I appreciate the offer more than you know, he said, but I have to decline. There was a long pause. Adrian, do you understand what you're turning down? I do, completely, and I'm still saying no. May I ask why? Adrian looked at the photo on his desk, a recent picture of him with Lena and Rosa at the park, all three of them laughing at something Lena had said. It was the only personal photo he'd ever displayed in his office. Because I finally figured out what success actually means, he said. And it's not in Tokyo. That's disappointing to hear, but I respect your decision. If you change your mind, I won't, but thank you. After he hung up, Adrian sat for a moment, waiting to feel regret or second thoughts. Instead, he felt lighter, as if a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying had lifted. He drove to Silverwood, arriving just as Rosa was making lunch. Lena was at school, he'd pick her up later, and Rosa was in the kitchen humming quietly to herself. You look different, she said when she saw him. Good different. I turned down Tokyo. Rosa's hand stilled on the vegetables she was chopping. You did? Yeah, called them this morning. Adrian, are you sure? That's a lot to give up. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing something better. He sat at the kitchen table. Rosa, can I tell you something? Always my whole life I've been chasing success the way my parents defined it. More money, bigger deals, more recognition, and no matter what I achieved, it was never enough. There was always the next thing, the next milestone. I was miserable, but I thought that was just the price of success. He paused, gathering his thoughts, and then I met you and Lena. And for the first time, I felt like I was enough. Not because of what I'd accomplished or how much money I had, but just because I was part of something real, part of a family. Rosa's eyes were wet. Oh Adrian, 2 years in Tokyo would be 2 years of missing Lena grow up. 2 years of not being here when you need me. 2 years of going back to being successful and lonely, and I can't do that. I won't do that, but your career will be fine. I'll figure out a way to make the international expansion work without relocating. Or I won't, and I'll do something else. But what I won't do is sacrifice what matters most for what matters least. Rosa came around the table and hugged him. This woman who taught him more about life in 6 months than 30 years of expensive education ever had. You're learning, she said softly. You're finally learning what I've been trying to teach you. What's that? That the richest person isn't the one with the most money. It's the one with the most love. That afternoon, Adrian picked Lena up from school as usual. She'd been quiet and sad all week, worried about him leaving. Lena, he said as they drove home, I need to tell you something important. Her face fell. You're going to Tokyo. No, I'm not going anywhere. She turned to look at him, hope and uncertainty mixed on her face. Really, really, I told them no. I'm staying here, with you and Grandma, forever. Well, I'll probably travel sometimes for work, but I'll always come back. This is where I belong, with you guys, with my family. Lena burst into tears, happy tears this time, and Adrian had to pull over so he could hug her properly. I thought you were going to leave, she sobbed into his shoulder. I thought everyone always leaves. Not me, he promised. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. Good, she said fiercely, hugging him tighter. That night, the three of them celebrated with a special dinner, Rosa's famous chicken mole, which Adrian had been begging her to teach him to make. While they cooked together with Lena helping by stirring and tasting, Adrian felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what he'd been missing his whole life. Not a bigger bank account, or a more impressive title. This connection, belonging, love. After dinner, while Lena was getting ready for bed, Rosa pulled Adrian aside. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I know that decision wasn't easy. It was the easiest decision I've ever made," Adrian replied. "Once I figured out what I actually wanted." "And what's that?" "This you too. Coming home to people who are actually happy to see me. Being part of something that matters. I spent 30 years trying to earn my parents' approval, their attention, their love, and I finally realized I'm never going to get it. But I have something better now. I have you." Rosa squeezed his hand. "We love you too, Adrian. Your family, real family." Later, when Adrian was tucking Lena into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Adrian, can I ask you something? Anything? Are you my dad now?" Adrian's breath caught. They'd never defined their relationship, had carefully avoided labels, both of them aware of how complicated the situation was. "What do you want me to be?" he asked carefully. Lena thought about it. "I had a dad once, but I don't remember him. Grandma says he loved me very much, and I believe her. But you're here now. You take care of me and Grandma. You teach me things and make me laugh. That's what dads do, right?" "Yeah, baby, that's what dads do." "Then I think you're my dad, if that's okay." Adrian had to look away, blinking hard. "That's more than okay. That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me, so I can call you Dad, if you want to." She smiled, that beautiful bright smile that had changed his life. "Okay, good night, Dad." "Good night, Lena." He made it all the way to the living room before he broke down, sitting on the couch with his face in his hands, crying like he hadn't cried since he was a child. Rosa found him there and sat beside him, not saying anything, just being present the way she'd taught him to be. "I never thought I'd have this," Adrian said when he could speak. "A family that actually wants me around. A child who looks at me like I matter." "You do matter," Rosa said. "You've always mattered. You just needed to find the right people to show you." "Thank you," he said, "for letting me in, for teaching me what I was missing, for giving me a chance to be better than my parents were." "You don't need to thank us. You earned your place here, Adrian, by showing up, by caring, by being present. That's all family really is, people who choose each other and stick around." They sat together in the quiet house, and Adrian realized he'd never felt more at home anywhere in his life. Spring arrived in Santa Aurora, bringing warm sunshine and blooming flowers. Rosa's garden flourished, and she spent hours teaching Lena about different plants, about patience and growth and nurturing life. Her health had never been better. Dr. Santos called her his miracle patient. Lena was thriving in kindergarten now, reading at a second-grade level and making friends easily. The shy, frightened child from the slums had blossomed into a confident, happy kid who believed the world was full of possibilities. And Adrian had found something he'd never expected: peace. He'd restructured his business to focus on projects he could manage locally, turning down opportunities that would take him away from Santa Aurora for more than a few days at a time. Some of his business associates thought he was crazy, sacrificing potential billions, but Adrian didn't care. He'd learned the hard way that money was meaningless without something real to spend it on, and he didn't mean things. He meant time. Time with people he loved. He'd also started a foundation inspired by Lena's story. The Rosa and Lena Foundation provided medical care, housing assistance, and educational support to families in poverty. He'd personally visited Barrio del Sol, walking through the place where he'd first found Rosa and Lena, and made it his mission to help other families find their way out. But the best moments weren't the big ones. They were the ordinary Tuesdays and Thursdays, the weekend pancake breakfasts, the evening walks around the neighborhood. They were helping Lena with her homework and listening to Rosa's stories and feeling like he belonged somewhere. One Saturday in late spring, they went on a picnic at Riverside Park, the three of them plus two of Lena's school friends and their families. Adrian watched Lena play on the playground, laughing and carefree, and felt Rosa sit down beside him on the picnic blanket. "You look content," she observed. "I am. Is that weird, after everything, all the drama of the past year, to just feel
quietly happy. That's not weird. That's life. Real life, not the performance version. This is what it's supposed to feel like. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lena hang upside down from the monkey bars, her hair hanging toward the ground, shrieking with laughter. "Adrian," Rosa said after a while, "I want you to know something. When you found us, when you came into our lives, I thought you were going to be our savior. The rich man who swooped in and fixed everything." "Rosa, let me finish. I was wrong. You didn't save us, we saved each other. You gave us security and opportunity, yes, but we gave you something you needed just as badly, a place to belong, a reason to come home. You gave me everything," Adrian said quietly, "and you've given it back tenfold. But more than that, you've shown Lena something crucial. You've shown her that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice. You chose us and we chose you. That's powerful, Adrian. That's the kind of lesson that will shape her whole life." That evening, back at the Silverwood house, they made dinner together, all three of them working in the kitchen, which had become their favorite room in the house. Rosa taught Adrian to make her mother's enchilada recipe, while Lena set the table and told them about a book she was reading. "It's about this girl who finds a magic door," she explained, "and behind the door is a whole new family who loves her, and she has to choose between them and her old family." "What does she choose?" Adrian asked, stirring the sauce carefully. "She doesn't have to choose. The magic door lets both families meet, and they all become one big family together. Isn't that cool?" "Very cool," Rosa said, exchanging a meaningful look with Adrian over Lena's head. After dinner, they watched a movie together, some animated thing about talking animals that Lena loved, and that Adrian found himself enjoying despite himself. Lena sat between them on the couch, holding both their hands, perfectly content. Before bed, as had become their ritual, Adrian and Rosa tucked Lena in together. "Tell me the story," Lena requested, as she did most nights. "Which story?" Adrian asked, though he knew. "Our story, how we became a family." So Rosa began, the way she always did. "Once upon a time, there was a brave little girl who lived with her grandmother in a place where times were hard," and Adrian continued. "And one day that little girl found something very valuable and had to make a choice." They took turns telling the story, embellishing it a little each time, turning their real life into a fairy tale. By the time they reached the happy ending, and they all lived together, loving each other forever and ever, Lena was drowsy and smiling. "That's my favorite story," she murmured, already half asleep. "Mine too," Adrian said softly. After she was asleep, Adrian and Rosa went to sit on the back porch, as they often did. The garden was beautiful in the twilight, fireflies beginning to emerge, the air sweet with the scent of Rosa's flowers. "You know what's funny?" Adrian said. "A year ago, if someone had told me this would be my life, that I'd be sitting on a porch in Silverwood, helping raise a 6-year-old growing vegetables, I would have thought they were crazy. And now I can't imagine wanting anything else. My parents think I've lost my mind. My mother actually said I was wasting my potentials by not taking the Tokyo deal. My father hasn't spoken to me in months. Does that bother you?" "It used to. I spent 30 years trying to make them see me, trying to earn their love, but I've realized something: they don't know how to love." "Not really. They were taught that love is conditional, transactional, something you earn through achievement. They never learned what you taught me." "What's that?" "That love is just given freely. Not because someone deserves it or earned it, but because they're there and they're real and they matter. You and Lena loved me before I'd proven anything, before I'd earned it. You just loved me." Rosa's eyes glistened in the fading light. "You earned it by showing up, Adrian. By being present and honest and willing to be vulnerable. That's all love really requires, showing up as yourself." They sat quietly for a while longer, listening to the sounds of the evening, crickets, distant traffic, a neighbor's wind chimes. "I used to think my life would be measured by my bank account or my business success," Adrian said. "Now I realize it should be measured by moments like this, by how many times Lena laughs in a day, by the vegetables growing in your garden, by the fact that I have somewhere I actually want to go home to." "That's wisdom," Rosa said. "Real wisdom. It took me 70 years to learn it. You figured it out at 30, you're ahead of the game." "Only because I had good teachers." A few months later, on a crisp October evening, Adrian made it official. He worked with lawyers to become Lena's legal guardian, co-parenting with Rosa. The paperwork was complicated. He wasn't adopting her, exactly, since Rosa was still very much her guardian, but he wanted legal recognition of their relationship. If something happened to Rosa, he wanted to make sure Lena stayed with him. When they told Lena, she just shrugged. "You were already my dad," she said matter-of-factly. "This just makes it official." That Christmas was the first real Christmas Adrian had ever celebrated. His childhood Christmases had been formal affairs, expensive gifts, catered meals, his parents' friends coming over for champagne. It had all felt hollow. This Christmas was different. They decorated the tree together, all three of them, using a mix of store-bought ornaments and ones Lena made in school. They baked cookies, even though Adrian burned the first batch. They watched holiday movies and drank hot chocolate and wrapped presents in paper that Lena had colored herself. On Christmas morning, Lena woke them both up at dawn, bouncing with excitement. The presents under the tree weren't expensive. Adrian had learned that the best gifts were meaningful ones, not pricey ones, but they were chosen with love. He gave Rosa a photo album he'd made, filled with pictures from the past year, Rosa in her garden, Lena's first day of kindergarten, the three of them at the park, at dinner, living their life together. On the last page was a photo from that very first day at the police station, the only one that existed of that moment, and underneath it, Adrian had written, "The day everything changed, the day I found my family." Rosa cried when she saw it, hugging him tightly. "I don't have words," she said, "for what you mean to us, for what this year has meant." "I know," Adrian said. "Me neither." Lena's present to him was a drawing she'd made at school, the three of them holding hands, standing in front of their house, with "Mi Familia" written carefully across the top. "That's us," she explained unnecessarily. "We're a family. The teacher said family means people who love each other, so I drew us." Adrian hung it in his office the next day, right above his desk where he could see it whenever he was working. People who visited would sometimes comment on it. The simple crayon drawing in its plastic frame, looking out of place among his business awards and expensive art. "That's my daughter's artwork," he'd say, and he never got tired of the way that felt my daughter. As winter turned to spring again, completing a full year since that life-changing day at the police station, Adrian found himself reflecting on everything that had changed. He'd gained a family, real family, built on choice and love instead of obligation and expectation. He'd learned what actually mattered in life, not success or wealth or recognition, but connection and presence, and showing up for the people you love. He'd discovered that the hole in his heart that he tried to fill with achievement and money could only really be filled by love. And he'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can find isn't what you were looking for at all. One evening, sitting on the porch with Rosa while Lena played in the backyard, Adrian said something he'd been thinking about for a while. "Thank you." Rosa looked at him curiously. "For what?" "For teaching me what my parents never did. For showing me what family actually means. For letting me be part of yours." "Adrian, you didn't just become part of our family, you completed it. We were surviving before we met you. Now we're thriving, but more than that, now we're whole, all three of us." From the backyard, Lena called out, "Dad, Grandma, come see, I found a butterfly." They walked out together, the old woman who'd survived poverty and illness through sheer strength of character, and the young man who'd survived wealth and loneliness through discovering what really mattered. And in the middle of the garden, surrounded by flowers and vegetables, and the life Rosa had cultivated with such care, stood a little girl who'd once been 4 years old, dragging a heavy suitcase full of money she refused to keep, teaching a stranger that integrity mattered more than survival. She was 6 now, happy and healthy and whole, holding very still with her hand extended while a monarch butterfly rested on her finger, its orange wings opening and closing slowly in the evening sun. "Look," she whispered, her eyes full of wonder. "It trusts me." Adrian and Rosa stood on either side of her, watching the butterfly, and Adrian thought about transformation, about how you could start life one way and become something completely different. How you could emerge from your own kind of chrysalis and discover you had wings you never knew existed. "Make a wish," Rosa said softly. Lena closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them as the butterfly took flight, spiraling up into the golden evening light. "What did you wish for?" Adrian asked. "That we stay together forever," Lena said simply. "All three of us." "That's not a wish," Rosa said, pulling them both close. "That's a promise." And standing there in the garden, with the sun setting and the butterfly disappearing into the sky, the three of them, the woman who'd taught what love means, the child who'd lived it, and the man who'd finally learned it, held each other tight. They weren't related by blood. They hadn't started as family, but they'd become something stronger than genetics could ever create. Family by choice, bound together not by obligation but by love, freely given and gratefully received. And in the end, that was the greatest treasure of all. Not the money in a suitcase, but the wealth found in each other's arms. Not the success measured in dollars, but the richness measured in moments like these. The real fortune had been found the day a little girl chose honesty over survival, teaching a lonely man that some things, love, integrity, family, are worth more than all the money in the world. And they lived not in perfect happiness, because life is never perfect, but in real happiness. The kind that comes from showing up, being present, choosing each other day after ordinary day. They lived, all three of them together, in the wealth that really matters, the wealth of the heart.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.